Hello, what have we here? And welcome to another episode of the There Are More of Us show, where we celebrate creators spreading positivity and joy through their love of Star Wars. Today's creator is author Olivie Blake. She wrote Then Fall Sidious in the latest installment of the From a Certain Point of View series for the Return of the Jedi film. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, and find out why Emperor Palpatine is Olivie's Roman Empire on this episode of the There Are More of Us show. There are more of us. Hello, what have we here? And welcome Olivie Blake to the There Are More of Us show.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm glad that you're here. We just talked a little bit before, but for those that aren't familiar with your work, what kind of content do you make?
So I write adult crossover sci-fi and fantasy, which is, I think, how I ended up here. I don't really know. My agent reached out to me and was like, "Hey, Star Wars thinks you should write for them." And I was like, "Well, tell them unequivocally yes. I don't know why they came to me, but I'm here."
Very glad that you are. You wrote Then Fall Sidious and the Return of the Jedi from a certain point of
Thank
view.
you.
Definitely one of the highlights of the book for me. And we'll
Thank
talk about
you.
a little bit about that later. But yeah, I've talked with my friend Malik about it because that's one of the stories we first both read when it came out, and it was just like banger after banger quote uh, throughout it.
I
And
do have a gift for writing psychopaths. So
and then I don't know if you've heard the audiobook version with Sam Witwer reading it in his Palpatine voice, and it just makes it.
God, that was so I know. Okay, so I haven't listened to it yet, but I did know that he read it and I knew he voiced Palpatine and I thought that was it didn't even occur to me that there would be an audiobook version of it, and once I found out I was like, that is amazing. And I've kind of been saving it. Like I really just want to savor it because I think this story is only like it's less than 3,000 words. It's quite short and it's one of the like hardest worked 3,000 words of my career, that's just like it's every word exactly as I want it to be, as every word just uh it was a real like I think I wrote it very easily, but then after kind of shaping it was such a process, and it's such a short piece, but it's such a like I'm just really glad we're talking. No one so far yet has asked me any questions about this story. So I'm super excited to be here.
So yeah, so the interesting thing about the framing of the story is it's as a countdown in the sort of the final moments of Sidious's quote unquote triumph. So how did you come up with sort of that structure, and how was it filling that out?
So I started as a fan fiction writer, and many years ago, I used it to sort of play with form a lot. Many years ago, I wrote a chapter. I wrote this very dramatic, it was like Sons of Anarchy meets Grey's Anatomy
Mhm.
fanfic called Ride or Die. And I did a chapter where I did a countdown, and I was doing it like just as a different way to break up the sections, but also to like heighten anticipation that the audience didn't know what we were counting down to.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember that it was very effective because people kept saying they felt this sense of dread as they would see the numbers drop. So I wanted to replicate that emotional effect, especially because Palpatine does not know. Like it's this sort of multi-layered thing that like the audience who has seen the film understands that Palpatine is about to die, but Palpatine doesn't know that. He doesn't.
Right.
So there's almost like dissonance between the audience being aware that something is coming and Palpatine not knowing it. And I really wanted that like when I so the way this works with the From a Certain Point of View is that we were invited to participate, and then we each got to pitch an idea of like which character we'd want to write. And I pitched a couple actually. Palpatine was my first choice, but I wasn't sure if they were going to let me get away with it. I wasn't familiar with the previous volume, so I didn't know that there was the previous Palpatine story, and I wasn't
Mhm.
sure if he was like too big a character to write. So my alternate suggestion was that I was going to write one of Jabba's like dancers. I had this idea of writing someone like one of the dancers as like a almost like a Vegas showgirl, like just going to work and then your boss is dead and like, oh well. Um, I was bringing a real dystopian energy to this, but I really wanted to write Palpatine. I really wanted to. It was like I was frustrated with the Supreme Court. I was really frustrated with the sense that like some people just really deserve comeuppance, you know?
Hmm.
Like and I loved this idea of just kind of being in his head, watching his ego, looking at this just utter just absolute disconnect from humanity and the complete just the hubris of it. You know, I wanted to lean super hard into the hubris and then watch him die on the page.
Hmm.
It just felt like it would be a cathartic and interesting exercise. And so I sat down, I kind of wrote it in one go and then just reworked like parts of it that I wanted it to make sense, but also not be too explicit. I was really counting on the audience being very familiar with the film and really understanding why the like I wanted it to feel like it had an escalating heartbeat, that every time he said, you know, a Jedi like my father before me, that it would just like you could just feel the doom and just
Hmm.
something coming. So the countdown and the syncopation and the repeated line, I just wanted it to feel like, oh God, my stomach hurts while reading.
Yeah, it's just you captured like you said you like earlier you like writing psychopaths. You very much captured his calculating psychopathic nature, like his narcissism.
Yeah.
Um and one of the lines I thought was really interesting where you talk about there was this symbiotic nature between, master and apprentice, this push and pull. And,
Yeah.
he's like, I've lifted you up. I've given you this. And I think that's really interesting given the whole nature that Palpatine just uses things and throws them away.
Yes. Yeah, this just I mean, I wanted to portray his weakness as being his total he's a very logical person. Like many psychopaths. He's
Mhm.
very logical with no empathy. And so he doesn't see there is no logical reason why in his mind why Vader would just throw him off at this moment. It's because it's completely emotional. He really doesn't see that there could be any connection between Luke and Vader. And I think just that weakness of complete misunderstanding of what love can be to a person and what like the complexity of human relationships, like that is what kills him really, is his misunderstanding of what humanity is. And I also wanted to spend a lot of time like on Anakin. So okay, this is my slightly shameful admission, which is that I came to Star Wars via the prequels,
Hmm.
because I was a teenager when the prequels came out. And I will not lie to you, I thought Hayden Christensen was so hot. Like that was totally my entry point. And I like Star Wars was not a huge thing in my family. Like it's not like that just wasn't a big thing. And so I kind of came to it independently, that after I realized, oh my gosh, they're doing these prequels and it's like this very interesting, very, very interesting story to me about fascism and about propaganda and how power works and the I talk my husband is not familiar with Star Wars either. And at this point
Hmm.
I was like, I got really into it during the prequel era, and learned a ton about it and read a lot of the books and stuff. And but my husband now knows nothing about it. One of my favorite things to tell people is that he once asked me who the Skywalker was, which that was complex. And then we have a friend who has two daughters, and I had somehow missed what they named the second daughter, and I asked my husband to find out, and I was like, okay, so what's her name? And he goes, it's Leah, but spelled weird. And he spelled, and I was like, oh my god, it's Leia. You didn't recognize Leia, like so anyway, that's how. But I was ranting to him because now my son is 2 years old and he
Hmm.
loves the Young Jedi Adventures
Yeah.
show, the Disney Plus. Like he loves it. And I was explaining to my husband, I was like, see, Anakin was too old to grow up one of the younglings. So like there was he had this connection to his mother that these younglings don't have. And so like they are more susceptible to the Jedi like propaganda way of life. And he wasn't, and he like and Qui-Gon knew that, and then Qui-Gon got murdered, and my husband was like, what are you saying? But just the I know obviously the prequels have their flaws, but the psychology of how we arrive there is so fascinating, and just the rise of this is how liberty dies. Like there's just such a fascinating in the same way that I find the Hunger Games a very interesting look at propaganda and how
Mhm.
people gain and hold power. Like I love that so much, and so I knew I wanted to write Palpatine because I found him to be such a fascinating character, not as like, in the original trilogy, he's almost a cartoon villain. He's almost just like, oh yeah, he's just this evil person who destroys planets without a care in the world and
Mhm.
doesn't care about his own like apprentice really. There's no loyalty anywhere, and it almost feels too extreme. But then to see him as a villain in the prequels, it's like this is just a man who's hungry for power. This is a very
Yeah.
believable man. And there is very little difference between him and our many of our current politicians at this point.
Mhm.
And and I think you sort of there's the implied absolute power corrupts absolutely, and watching it happen is so interesting, and watching the end result of that absolute corruption and absolute power. I loved the idea of bringing it back to Anakin as just a boy,
Mhm.
and just I'm now in the process. This is because my son is 2 years old and I can never watch movies all the way through. I'm in the process of watching May December, and it's a
Mhm.
very interesting just the idea of like a boy who's having his story told to him, and what that does to his state of mind, and what that makes a person into. And it just really it makes the whole story of Anakin slash Darth Vader so much richer. And for some reason I was desperate to do this from the perspective of the monster.
Mhm. The monster that believes he made him.
Yeah, it's I just one of the most beautiful things about that story is that, like, I think Palpatine really believed that he had broken Anakin and remade him into
Mhm.
Darth Vader, and he didn't. And that's gorgeous. That's an amazing thing to say about humanity.
Right. And then I think that also ties really well into Kenobi finale where, he Vader tells him like, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did.
Yes.
Not Palpatine. I did.
Yeah. And you'd have to think like he'd have to believe that, right? Like he has to believe that.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's such a Star Wars is ultimately this just really rich family drama. And it's a great piece of psychology. And I just was so excited to play with that here. I was so happy when they told me that I could write
Yeah. And I'm very glad that you did, and I know several of my friends are as
him.
well. It's a wonderful addition to this universe. And honestly, I feel like there would be a good parallel, like 20 years down the line when we get the Revenge of the Sith one to Mace Windu,
Oh yeah.
to his final moments where he thinks like, okay, we've defeated the Sith Lord. The chosen one is here. Like we've got this. We're gonna end the war, and then wait, what happened?
Yeah. I mean that's the other thing that I really think is so great is that there are flaws in the Jedi way of life,
Hmm.
and the like one person's pain truly brought it all crumbling down, and that's how something was never strong enough to begin with. So that's just another just the undercurrents in the Star Wars universe are so good. And it's just such a rich tapestry of story. Again, I'm really excited that we're doing this because again, no one ever asked me about this story, and because I don't like at this point in my life slash artistic career, I can't read my reviews,
Hmm.
so I just have no idea what anyone thinks. Like this is the first time anyone is talking to me about this.
Well, when my friends that have their own Star Wars podcast see that, I may have opened the floodgates for you.
Yeah, luckily, I mean, it's such a short piece that I feel like I'm probably telling you everything that there
Hmm.
is to know about writing it and working on it. But yeah, God, it's so exciting. And I'm always very gratified too whenever people talk to me about how much they love the prequels, because truly they're terrible movies. But
I
like,
love them.
for Right. I love them, and as someone who lives sort of primarily in my imagination, I see what is so just delicious about them.
Hmm. I would defend them with it.
Thank
Like
you. Thank
I
you.
would
I
defend.
was worried. I told my agent, who's also a huge Star Wars fan, but she came into it because her family loves it. So she watched the original trilogy when she was young, and that's like a more that's a more like legitimate place to love the franchise from. But being someone who comes to it from the prequels makes me feel like that's what's so wonderful about it too. That whatever your entry point is, there's still so much. There's so much lore. There's so much to love, and
Hmm.
it's so exciting to be part of the canon.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I dabble in fic writing, but that's just for my imagine it for things to come out of my head and onto the page so the story can develop. Uh, but like
Yes.
yeah, but I think, having talked to several authors like yourself, it's just like, when you're just a fan and you see these other people creating things, like it's harder to see like the person besides like, okay, they wrote this, but then you talk to people or like interacting on social media, you see like, no, 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 y'all love Star Wars too. Like you guys aren't just collecting a paycheck, you're collecting a paycheck and
Yeah.
doing something you love with something you love.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was totally something to do for the honor of it. And
Mhm.
what a like God, what a lasting influence for any body of work to be so meaningful that everyone just signs up for it because they love it. Like that's the goal as a creator, I think, to create something that is loved in that way. George Lucas must sleep very well at night.
He has impacted millions, if not billions, around the world.
Yeah, in a lasting way too.
Hmm.
It's interesting to watch the sort of Disneyfication of Star Wars. I have nothing really to say about it because my son does love Young Jedi. So we'll see when it's time to introduce him to Star Wars. We'll see how he feels about it.
Yeah, my nieces, they, well, besides the oldest one because she is now legally an adult, which blows my mind. But the so she's seen all the movies, but the
Mhm.
younger ones they differentiate between like the live action as like adult Star Wars and like Young Jedi Adventures as kid Star Wars. So they're like, we'll watch
Yeah.
Star Wars, but it's got to be the kid version. I was like, it's all for kids. And they're like, no, no,
Yeah.
this one. I was like, all right, you guys are negotiating, and I'll respect it. uh, but so let's get into like your portion of the fandom. So like, what's some of your
Yeah.
favorites? What is your favorite book?
Oh my God. Whenever I get asked that question, it's like I've never read a book in my life. Um, I love the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante, which begins with My Brilliant Friend, because much like Star Wars, it's this sort of sweeping epic about one woman's life growing up in Italy. And there's sort of the actually I was joking when I said that, but it is, I guess, sort of like it in terms of there being like the political fabric and this sort of almost chosen one energy because she's like the only woman in her village that actually goes to school and gets a university degree, becomes a writer, and just a really fascinating personal story as well. But yeah, I get really engrossed in characters more so than worlds. I really
Hmm.
love that, like what makes a person, and following them on that sort of journey.
And what's your favorite Star Wars book?
That would be harder to say. I was, yeah, it's been a while. Like I said, I didn't really even realize they were doing the From a Certain Point of View books until Tracy Dion did a story. I love
Hmm.
Tracy, and Tracy's such a like she identifies as a fangirl, which I love. And her story was like from the perspective of the cave. I loved that. So it was more like I knew of the creators that were involved here. I also the What Does He Eat story that I
Hmm.
can't now remember who the author was, but I thought that was so good. So basically, what I'm saying is the From a Certain Point of View collections are fantastic. I love
Hmm.
them, and I also like some of those stories have really stuck out to me. The like, but what does he eat? And the idea of like being part of I think complicity, I guess, in revolution, and how much risk you take on as an individual. It's also interesting, and especially in the context of the socio-political context that we live in, like
Hmm.
what is the appropriate course of action, what is the next right thing. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And then there are people that say that Star Wars isn't political, and I'm just like,
That is madness.
I
That is
don't
incorrect.
understand. I don't understand. What do you mean? Like, George Lucas has been explicit about it. Like,
Yeah.
Newt
Yeah, I
Gunray,
don't think.
Newt Gingrich, Lot Dodd, Senator Dodd. Like, Palpatine was based on Nixon. Like, come on now. And then George Bush. Like, come on.
Yeah, it is hard to imagine that anyone could disconnect from the politics of Star Wars. Like they're so blatant. But whatever.
Hey, if you just want to see lightsabers go burr, that's fine. But you can't say it's not.
Right. No, you absolutely cannot. That's fully not engaging in the work. And
Yeah.
okay.
Three of your favorite Star Wars characters from Legends or canon, any era.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh boy. I mean, I think that, because I've entered this conversation via the prequels. I mean that I think Obi-Wan Kenobi is a fascinating character.
Hmm.
This was again part of my rant to my husband that I was like, Obi-Wan knew that they shouldn't take on Anakin. He knew it was a liability, but he like then Qui-Gon died and he had to take it on and he was too young and he wasn't ready. And there's just like there's so much tragedy built in here. Like there is so much tragedy built into Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and
Hmm.
Padme Amidala. Like this, just the three of these, just possibly the most like Shakespearean tragic figures with just every single thing going wrong. And all they had going for them was the love they had for each other. And that is
Hmm.
also what ultimately destroys them is the like that they can't save anyone. It's so tragic in just a meaty like Greek drama kind of way.
Hmm.
So yeah, just like any way you turn those three characters is so fascinating.
I've come to appreciate Padme a lot more as I've gotten older, and obviously like studying a lot more and everything like that. And it just, it. I grew up on the Revenge of the Sith novelization, but it's sort of like it hurts every time I watch that movie and I don't see her deleted scenes because the delegation of 2000 and her forming the foundation of the rebellion is so important to the story. Uh,
Yes, yeah.
so you have, Leia carrying on that will of fire in terms of the rebellion, and then Luke's carrying on her will of fire that there's still good in Anakin. And it's just like, it's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean that there are definitely flaws, I think, with what's on the screen and the implication that like she's a character that dies of a broken heart. And I
Hmm.
I think that we have at least the freedom as part of the collective imagination of fandom to make that story richer, that it's not just a broken heart. There's so much
Hmm.
like yeah. So I get the like criticisms of her character arc, but I also think that she's such a fascinating person that there are so many elements there. And you're absolutely right that everything being able to watch them as a prequel is a very interesting creative exercise because you do get to you in a non-linear way connect those dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's fascinating. And it was nice. It was important to me also to bring her into that story because truly, Palpatine would look back on her death and see that like in the story that I wrote, he leans on the irony that she kind of helps create the downfall of the Republic she loved so much, but she
Right.
also creates its revolution. And
Hmm.
of course, Palpatine doesn't see that. And and then he dies.
Yeah. Yeah. What was
It's
it?
a it's
The line was the Republic's greatest champion. I think you said, yeah. So it was just like, it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
true.
It is true, and of course you could look at the world that way. Everything that Palpatine says is correct. Nothing he says is wrong, but he doesn't see the whole truth, and
Hmm.
that's his downfall. And I just, oh God, love that.
Yeah. If you guys haven't read this story yet, I very much encourage you to do so.
The story is much shorter than this interview, so
Yeah, yeah, it's quick, but you're gonna read it several times.
oh
Uh,
well, thank you.
yeah. Um, what is your favorite Star Wars quote?
I think it's the this is how liberty died. This what is the exact quote? I know it's embarrassing now that I can't think of the exact,
S-
but
s- So this is how Liberty dies with thunderous applause.
that's the one. Yeah. Yeah. God, I think the way it's delivered and just the visual and just the heartbreakingness of it. And it's also such an iconic line and it's so like I feel that way a lot. I
Hmm.
certainly as we approach another election year, I hear that quote playing playing in my head very often. But I mean, again, it's richer for knowing that it's a prequel and that Liberty doesn't die. Like
Hmm.
it does, definitely does, but not it's not annihilated, and that
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah, I've been my brother and I have been saying that quote since the 2016, the lead up to the
Yeah.
2016 election. So it's just like every 4 years, time to bring it back out.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I remember the when we were watching the Brett Kavanaugh, what do you call that?
Oh,
Trial? I guess it wasn't really a trial, the
the confirmation
confirmation.
hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember I was walking my dog and I was just like crying, thinking this is how Liberty dies, and all these like men were around me totally fine on their lunch break. Just like yeah, and this story comes from that place of just like I have to believe that as horrifying as it is to watch, it's not the end. It can't be the end. That like even hope is never completely destroyed. Star Wars has to be right about that.
Yeah. I was in my professional responsibility class in law school, and that was like part of our homework assignment to watch that. I'm like, gee, I wonder why.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, definitely. For as much as the like romance scenes are pretty cringy,
Hmm.
the rise of fascism is just you cannot look away. It's just
Hmm.
so powerful.
Yeah. And so, what is your favorite musical piece from Star Wars?
I'm gonna all my answers. Oh my God, all my answers are gonna be. So I used to play the flute, and I
Hmm.
had the Star Wars the book of music and the like the
Yeah.
Meadow song.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one, especially for the flute. So that's it. Yeah.
I had that book as well. I played the alto sax. My favorite
Yes.
was Across the Stars. Like that is
Yes.
the pure reason why I brought the book, was so I could learn how to play Across the Stars.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's probably I guess that's my real answer. But I
Mhm.
think the Meadow song specifically was one that I played because it had like a level of challenge to it for my instrument. So that's the one I'm saying.
Okay, so it's time for your surprise mystery box question.
Yes.
Uh,
What is it?
so you have uh you now Palpatine has read your short story. This is during the sequel era, so he's got nothing but time to read it while he's hooked up to that machine.
Yeah. Cool.
And now you get to have a one-on-one with him. What are you
Oh boy.
telling this psychopath to his face about your story and how you portrayed him?
Oh my gosh. Well, like, there's only one thing to do, right? Is just you got to play the reverse psychology. You just got to be like, oh, I was so wrong, Palpatine. Like, obviously, you're so great and clever, and you've outsmarted me. It's the Gruffalo. Got to play it like the mouse. Like, oh no, I'm the scariest creature in this woods. Anyway, sorry again with the 2-year-old references. But yeah, like I feel like that's the only move. The only way you get out of that situation is just be like, absolutely. What do you tell a narcissist? You're absolutely correct. You're right.
Mhm.
You are definitely. You just keep doing you, and like eventually you'll destroy yourself, which is the whole point of the story. But as a narcissist, he won't learn anything from it. So
Yeah, he's just like, this is just a temporary setback. I mean, like, is it though? Like, I can see your bone in your hand. Like, you're kind of a zombie. Seems like more than a
I
setback.
I also I wanted to lean on the way that Palpatine like weaponizes his own like victimization. Like he creates his own underdog story. And
Hmm.
I feel like that is necessary to the fascist arc because you have to believe that you are like reclaiming power that should be yours, which is
Mm-hmm.
very interesting. Like in this time, one of
Yep.
my greatest fears is like accidentally raising an incel.
Oh no, I get it.
Yeah. Well, like I feel that in some respects, it would be easier to raise a girl because I think girls do have that like underdog energy of like, get yours, and that's hard to do with, especially my son for some reason he has hazel eyes and blonde hair. And so it's like, oh my God, I'm accidentally raising a white man. Like, how do I do this in a way that doesn't accidentally create an Emperor Palpatine, someone who
Mm-hmm.
believes that, oh, he's reaching for his own destiny and this is what he deserves. And like, he doesn't see it as exploitation. He sees it as a necessary good, that ultimately this is good because he is the one who knows the right answers.
Yeah.
This is something I play on, and I'm best known probably for the Atlas 6 series. And the Atlas 6 series is also about ethics and about power, and what is the difference between power and exploitation, which there is none.
Yeah.
um and yeah, so yeah, it's weird. It's There is so much living in this like 2,500 word story. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, connecting it to I mean, granted, the sole story surrounds the struggle between the Palpatine and the Skywalkers, but
Hmm.
just how this is sort of like one of the apex moments of the story is Palpatine's demise, and just the lead up where he's thinking like, I've won again, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
no, just
Yeah.
turn around slightly, look to your right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the idea of, I focused a lot on Anakin's grief, and that his grief is something, in some respects, for a long time Anakin's grief is something that Palpatine is able to weaponize, and it's
Mm-hmm.
something that he's able to, like, he sees that as a weakness, but his grief comes from his love. And so for him to save his son, to risk everything to save his son from a place of love that is also grief, like, it was a beautiful way for me, I think, to show that this thing that could be seen as a weakness is also an ultimate strength.
Yeah. Yeah, the one of the lines from Mike Chin's From a Certain Point of
Yes.
View, Return of the Jedi story was Anakin Skywalker let go. And it's like, yeah, if you did that 20 years earlier, 30 years earlier, things would have happened a lot differently. But it was like, yeah, it's
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
Palpatine, tooled that grief to serve his own purposes because it fed his
Hmm.
anger and hatred, as you write about in your story. But it's that holding on that Skywalkers do just so well.
Yeah. Yes. Well, it's also Shakespearean in the sense that it's the confluence of the perfect moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like here he's watching his son die before his eyes, and like realizing that he actually does have something to live for, or something to die for in that moment, which is his son. And it's beautiful.
Yeah. But thank you for coming on. Before we go, I'm sure you got some upcoming projects. Yeah, anything that you would like to plug?
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So, under my young adult romance byline, my book 12th Night, which is like a remix of Shakespeare's 12th Night featuring girls and gaming and fandom, actually very relevant to this.
Mm-hmm.
That's coming out May 28th. And then my short story collection, again, as Olivie Blake and more of the adult stuff. But yeah, my anthology of January is coming out in October.
And then if people want to find you on social media, where can they find you?
I am everywhere pretty much as at Olivie Blake. Find me on Tumblr. I feel like if you're listening to this, you're probably still on Tumblr. Yeah, and also Spotify. I've got lots of public playlists on Spotify. This is what's important to me, fandom and music.
Oh, nice. Uh, what is fandom without what are any of these franchises without their music, honestly?
I know, and it's a very multimedia appreciation. This is why I have interior illustrations in all my books. I like to
Mm-hmm.
really immerse in the work.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on. Make sure that you go follow Olivie, go get some of her books, and definitely read Then Fall Sidious, as we haven't, been talking about it for like 20, 30 minutes of this
Yes.
episode.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I guess I forgot to mention that it's a Julius Caesar reference, the title. So in case anyone needed me to confirm that, yes.
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. I was very much a big Julius Caesar fan in middle school and high school, both the Shakespeare play and the history of it all. So that makes it even better for
Yeah.
me.
I guess you could say that Emperor Palpatine is my Roman Empire.
That's just
And
gonna
on that note, goodbye.
that's gonna be the captions. Emperor Palpatine is my Roman Empire. Uh Thank you all again for tuning in. I hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you again, Olivie, for coming on. And remember, until
Thank
next time,
you.
there are more of us.